just to get you up to speed. This is part of a series of videos in which I'm trying to explain the long and difficult process that I had to go through, so I managed to overcome my fear of rejection, and overall fear of approaching and talking to women. But it also allowed me to develop my social skills, confidence when talking, body language, and know how to lead the conversation. So, what happened with the sales thing? Well, I definitely didn't like it, but I admit, it did somehow help me with my fear of rejection. And most importantly, I eventually learned how to properly deliver my message, or sales pitch. That alone helped me to further develop my social skills, of which formerly I had none. From my perspective, most of what entails having social skills is simply about timing, learning when is the proper time to say something, to deliver your message. And for that, you also need to listen. To this point, something I learned through this whole experience is that people love to talk about themselves. Now, this doesn't mean that every woman that you come across is going to love to talk about herself with you. But if you can choose between making awkward remarks about either you, or her, or just don't know what to say, it'll be better if you express some curiosity about her career and achievements. But going back to my job at the time, I really didn't like it, so I decided that it was time for me to quit. Besides, I started to think about becoming an entrepreneur. I had some people in my life who influenced my decisions to some extent. One of those people was one of my many uncles. He was an entrepreneur himself, but most importantly, and for the sake of this conversation, he was a ladies' man, a borderline womanizer, and that, we all knew in the family, had got him into trouble from time to time. He was quite the character, 4 times divorced and always looking for a new girlfriend, new ex-wife, or whatever new romantic interest. He was, however, a financially successful man, and that allowed him to live that particular lifestyle. So let's say that up to a point I looked up to him. Nevertheless, he really never gave me a solid piece of advice regarding dating. He will only insist that if I wanted to make money in life, I had to start my own business at some point. I actually took that to heart. More on that later. Whatever the case, I didn't have the money yet to start my own business, so I still needed to do something. And although I really disliked sales, calling over the phone, setting up business appointments, etc., I came to discover that I was actually one of the best in the company. Why didn't I realize that before, you may ask? Well, my boss wasn't really good at motivation. I even came to think that he would avoid that at all costs just for preventing other employees from asking for a rise. I know. Great business strategy. The thing was that while others were pretty much wasting time, making excuses for not doing any phone calls, or as few as they could anyway, I was one of the few who would actually keep going regardless of how uncomfortable it was, and how much anxiety it would give me. Hence, there is another life lesson for you: consistency. Even if you are terrible at first, you will get it right eventually, perhaps just by mere statistics. So when I went to quit, he actually offered me a different job position. The salary wasn't way better, but sales commissions were. Plus, I would get the chance of traveling around the country. On paper, it sounded good, but in practice, it was more challenging, as it involved cold approach. Meaning approaching people that you don't know and trying to sell them something. I would be a sales representative traveling with other sales agents to expose our products through multiple exhibition events. Basically, having an exhibition booth in business centers, halls, or whatever you want to call it. So aside from dealing with customers that may approach our booth, my job was to approach other companies at the event. You know, approaching people who are there to sell their own products and try to sell them my own products. Not stressful at all. I am not gonna lie, it was freaking terrifying at first. Cold approach is no joke. Although I will admit, people were far less rude when talking in person than over the phone. But still, the success rate overall wasn't way better. I would still have to be very careful on my delivery, timing, learn when to talk and when to listen. Inadvertently, I was further developing my social skills to another level. Way beyond the potato sack level that I started with anyway. Better yet, the invisible wall. What just happened to this fiend? Wasn't I an introverted, super shy guy unable to go up to people and talk? Well, the thing was that I wasn't so emotionally invested in each approach I made. And yes, there were many businesswomen, some of them in their mid to late 20s. Of course, I would still feel terrible when I was deflected, but I would attribute that to either poor delivery, lack of ability to quickly make people see the advantages of the product, bad timing, or simply being unable to identify in what way the product could be of any benefit to them. So to mitigate that, I started to work on a script of sorts, just to know what to say, when and how. I also learned how to deal with excuses or things people would say so they can dismiss me ASAP. The curious thing was that some of those people actually end up having some interest in the product, They were just denying themselves from it. Could this also be somehow translated to the way you should talk to women when trying to get to know them? Heck yes. Along these lines, another thing I learned is that while women may consider you bold, confident, and cool when you are direct to them face to face, they will consider you a creep, are completely nauseating when doing the same through either phone, text, or yes, social freaking media. Although this last part is easier said than done, I had to really improve and change things around this concept, so it was actually useful to me down the road. But it was a good start regardless. I remember one approach in particular in this business environment. The young executive was a woman in her mid-20s. Up to this point, this was the most beautiful woman I had ever had the chance to talk with. Of course, I didn't try to flirt with her or anything, I was there to sell a product after all. But for a guy in my particular situation, I had never imagined that I would be walking up to a woman such as that, and straight up talking to her like it was nothing. So did I close the deal? Well, not really. At the end, whether or not they will take into a new piece of software wasn't completely her decision. But I did my best and never came across as nervous, anxious, or incompetent. And my dreaded enemy, the invisible wall? Was it finally gone? I told you, this beast is hard to kill, very hard. While I was able to cold approach people in a business setting, talking to a woman when you are emotionally invested was still a completely different game. And I came to learn that soon enough.